Welcome back to Tabletop Glory. My name is Graham Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about expanding our modular trench designs. Now, last time we showed you how to do this, which is what I'm referring to as a basic billet. Now, that is basically just a fancy way of saying this is the most basic version of our modular trench that we're going to be doing in this series, and this is basically what you would describe as brand new or off the assembly line, or whatever phrasing you like to do for a non-battle damaged version of something. With any case, these are the tools you're going to need for today. Let's crack on with the rest of the video. So, let's talk about battle damage. Now, in this series, we are currently working on these for Trench Crusade, but these could be used for a lot of different things. So if we take one of our blank billets, and that's something that doesn't have any of that texture paint on top, this is what we're going to be modifying. Now, it's important to remember that we have glued this together with hot glue. So, if we're cutting into the side, we're probably going to want to use something like a hobby knife or an extending knife or whatever you want to refer to this as. And that is going to help us cut through that hot glue, because today's video is going to require some kind of wire cutter. I really like this style because you can push the prongs together, and that allows the wire to form freely while still cutting through the hot foam, and that allows us to get a more irregular design. And I like the irregularity because our brains are programmed to patterns, and if you try to cut the whole thing with a knife, you're gonna find that your craters all kind of look exactly the same, or maybe they have one big gouge in the same direction or something like that. So, okay, starting out, like I said, we're going to be using a hot wire cutter, and our goal is to figure out which direction this wire wants to bend, and then we are basically going to do this repeated motion, dipping into the foam wherever we want that crater to end up, and that's going to cause a bunch of irregular cuts. Now, it's okay if all of the scrap foam doesn't come out. We can connect those cuts together using our knife at various different angles and removing that, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. Assuming that you don't have access to a woodland scenic hot foam cutter, and you're thinking about buying one, do keep in mind that these forks are really great for flexibility, and that's just because of the design of how everything connects into the handle. So when you're looking at your hot wire foam cutters, if you're going to be buying one, you might see ones that look like this. And that's meant for taking really nice shallow cuts off of something. And this is great for something like sculpting mountains and things like that, because you can kind of just do these nice big plunge cuts and do these really nice valley gorges. But they don't really bend, and I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. But I really prefer this style of foam cutter. If you can get one exactly like this with the interchangeable heads, then you can have the best of both worlds. But keep in mind that these get very, very hot. They can overheat very easily. They can easily cut through something. And because this doesn't have a safety switch, it's just on or off, these can get very hot. You'll think they're cool and lay them down, and you'll either burn the surface of whatever you lay them down on, or accidentally burn yourself. So keep that in mind when you are buying your hot wire foam cutter. In my opinion, these are way nicer because you can just plunge a hole into something and really hog out a lot of material. And you can actually get these wands in some pretty impressive lengths. So if you are wanting to do something like mountain ranges and things like that for like let's say, model trains, you can get some pretty long wands for still being able to do those nice big plunge cuts and just cutting out a huge gouge in a piece of styrofoam. One thing to keep in mind is there's a difference between a crater and a shell hole. Now, what's the big difference? Well, typically when a bombshell impacts something, it goes kind of deep and then explodes upwards and sends the debris everywhere. Whereas typically when something impacts, like an asteroid, for example, it's going to come in at an angle and one of the sides of your crater is going to be higher. This is also how we can simulate either duds not going off, meaning a shell that doesn't explode, or something falling out of the sky like a UFO or an airplane or whatever the case is that you want to add to your trenches. So, if we're going to simulate something that has hit the ground and not exploded, we kind of want a bit of like a tear duct shape or a triangle shape. And the rounded side is going to be the side that the object has come into the ground from. And the sharp side is going to be where the glancing blow has happened and gone down into the ground. So you're going to end up with a large mound on one side and a shallow mound on the other, with that teardrop shape as our impact crater. Now that is for angled things that have hit the ground and not exploded. So keep that in mind if that's what you're wanting to do. We will probably simulate a few of those off camera with some of the other billets that I'm going to be doing, but today's video we're going to keep things simple and we're just going to talk about a generic impact crater. So let's go ahead and show you up close how I'm going to do that. As you can see, I'm really struggling to work with what initially sounded like a really great technique, and I think this is a fine example of a expensive tool getting in the way of a simple task. This does what it's intended to do very, very well. And one of the reasons it comes with the wand attachment is because of people doing what I'm doing. Typically, you would take a much thicker wire and you would loop it around the contacts and you would allow it to sit slack, and that thicker wire would hold its shape and you could use that to kind of gouge into the foam. And I think that works really well along with the Woodland Scenics tool, as well as just putting a thicker wire in. But honestly, using the wand attachment that this tool comes with is going to do the exact same job, and I ultimately knew that I was going to be switching to that anyway, but I just wanted to show some alternate techniques in case you already own a hot wire foam cutter. Again, it's not a great solution, but you can definitely get there in the end. To this wand tool, and this is going to give us a lot more control, and we can kind of just mush it around in there and kind of cut away. And you'll notice that I'm not just like hogging it around. This is going to help us to create some irregular shapes. And get in there nice and deep. Is we can take our knife and we're going to add some sharp edges to these larger gouges, so that they're not so round. And we also want to try and take out any of this like super hard leftover almost crystallized styrofoam. And that's just going to give us a much cleaner finish. And you can see how this would be super easy but more time consuming to do this all with an X-Acto blade from the beginning. The hot wire cutter really just helps us to get down and into the block of foam a lot faster than we would be able to with the knife alone. Okay. And this is going to be a great place to kind of stop here for a moment and start prepping the mound that is going to be the edge of the crater, which is going to roughly be, you know, about a centimeter or so taller than the edge of everything else around it. So I'm just going to be doing a bit of a voiceover here while we watch what I'm doing. Now the footage is playing back at double speed. Now this is some custom basing paste that I have made, and we'll talk about that in a future video. But for now you can use any kind of basing paste that you want. My paste tends to have a little bit more wall spackle in it, so it tends to be a little bit on the thicker side. It really allows me to kind of water things down without destroying the texture. So you're going to see me kind of manipulating it with water. I put a big gloop of it on, and then I use a wet brush to kind of manipulate it and push it around a little bit. Now you are going to see me pulling some chunks out. Those are just some larger rocks and things that got mixed in through other projects, and I'm just removing them because it doesn't really work with the scale. Always kind of try and keep that thing in mind when working on projects like this, is the scale of the debris that we're adding to this piece. Is it going to look out of place once the miniatures are there? You're also going to notice that I'm not adding any extra sand or rock or any kind of debris like that. I don't think it really needs it. We might add a little bit when we go to add some scattered grass here and there once the project is fully done. But honestly, at this point in time, I don't think it's needed. Now you're going to notice also I'm dragging the brush up from the middle to the outside, and I'm doing that to clear those pathways that we cut out to kind of maintain this shape. I'm also going to be using various like popsicle sticks and things like that to kind of drag through the mud as well to try and maintain some of these grooves and really drag them out through the texture paint. Now, typically if I'm doing a project like this, I'm probably going to do 4 to 5 coats of this, which usually takes about the better part of an afternoon to really dry all the way to the point where I feel comfortable doing any kind of dry brushing or anything like that on top of this to really make the colors pop. So just keep that in mind, that the more product you're putting on, the longer it's going to take to cure all the way before you can really start to paint it, because the paint can reactivate this stuff if it hasn't dried all the way. And here we have at least this final product. Now, in my opinion, this is a heavily weathered crater. When I said a centimeter of deflection, I meant that was kind of a maximum of centimeter from our original flat top. I feel like that was important to clarify. I should have said that earlier in the video. However, I will be making a more dramatic raise in the terrain on the next one, which I feel is a bit more wargamey. Whereas this one's a bit more diorama, a bit more realistic. This one to me feels, and I'm quite happy with it, but it feels more like a crater that's been in the environment for a while. Maybe it's rained a whole lot, maybe a vehicle drove over it at some point, maybe a lot of troops have run back and forth across the top of here and kicked the crest of the crater off, but there's a lot of depth here. And I feel like even just putting a small amount of water effects in the bottom and creating a puddle would do a really great job at telling a story with this piece. So I'm going to leave this one as it is, but typically if I wanted to raise this up more, I'd put about 5 or 6 levels of this basing paste on. Now this basing paste does take a fair amount of time to dry. It's a custom mixture of mine, but even if you were buying basing paste in a large bottle from Vallejo, it's still going to take a long time to dry. Doing a single one of these is going to take the better part of an afternoon, so I recommend having a bunch of them ready to go all at once. But it's still going to take several hours to dry, and I'd really recommend, if you're going to be painting on top of the basing paste, that you don't paint it until the next day. Give it a whole 12-ish hours to cure all the way, and that should give you plenty of time to make sure that your paint is not going to reactivate this surface in any way, shape, or form. Now, if you're noticing that the top is starting to get a little bit heavy on these trenches, you can always poke little holes in the bottom of the foam here, mostly in the corners, and put little BBs for a BB gun, like a metal BB in the bottom, preferably a lead BB, and that should help weigh things down a bit more if you're a little concerned about these getting tippy. But for as big as we've made these shouldn't be tipping over unless you like really smack the crap out of them while you're trying to play. So, I am going to be making a slightly more exaggerated one of these to look a little bit fresh, so that you can see the difference between an old crater and a new crater. But just know that the new crater is made the exact same way that I made the old one. The only difference is I'm adding a small amount of foam in triangle-shaped wedges all the way around the crater hole, and that's going to help give the basing paste something to sit on and be a little bit more proud and stand up tall, and instead of falling flat as it cures. That's the only big difference, and I'm not going to be doing quite as big a dramatic hole as this one. Maybe something more that is akin to something like a mortar that would be fired by hand instead of an artillery shell. And yeah, so if you want to have one that goes off the edge though, go ahead and do so. Just keep in mind that you're going to have to cut up the edges of the foam to make it look like the wood has splintered, as opposed to just doing the same style of cutting up that we did with the ground. And I will probably show a close-up of something like that in our next video, where we're going to be talking about barbed wire and other types of accoutrement that go with stuff like this to really help tell the final story. So stay tuned for that. I don't know if that's going to be next week's video, because I'm trying to do Trench Crusade every other month. That way you guys don't just burn out on the same content over and over and over again. But when this is all said and done, we should have a full table of Trench Crusade terrain. And I think these modular trenches are turning out pretty great. So without further ado, I'm going to show you the final product without any grass or anything like that, because that's going to be part of its own video. But I will show you the final two products here in just a moment. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who has been supporting the channel so far. It is a huge dream of mine to be able to turn content creation into a full-time job someday, and I wouldn't be able to do that without all of you. And in theory, I'm technically doing that now. I am able to just barely keep my head above water thanks to all of you guys, and I am eternally grateful for that. I am still struggling to find work due to disabilities, but that is life sometimes. In any case, thank you guys so much for all the love and support, and here we go. Okay, so I put a little bit of a dry brush on just so that you guys could see things a little bit better, get a better understanding of the depth that we're working with, as well as the shape that the final crater had. I've also taken the liberty of doing two that are a little smaller, a little deeper, but a little bit more proud, and it may be a little bit difficult to see, but I have built them up with adding some little triangles of foam around the outside edges, and I'll get you a close-up of this in just a second. These turned out great. I can't wait to add more to the other pieces that I'm working on. Again, we're doing an entire table, but each one of these videos is just focusing on one or two individual pieces so that you guys can get a better understanding of the total project once you see it all finished. In any case, I hope you guys learned something interesting today. I had a lot of fun working on these. And until next time, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Bye-bye.